official.
Hey everyone, my name is Zack Esgar. We're glad you're on the podcast today with us. Today we've got a good friend of mine. His name is Neil Larson. Neil and I go way back. We went to church camp together as kids, and then we were counselors together through most of our college years. Through all that, we've been great friends and just been really fun to see how God's called him into ministry and his family. So, Neil, we're glad you're on the podcast today. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing these days.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. It's so fun to be on here with you, man. Yeah, I think so. What God's been kind of doing in our lives is just wild time in ministry right now. So we were kind of called to come to Austin, Texas and go try some new ministry models. By the way, I'm part of the Navigators. So I joined whenever I was in college with the Navigators. And then through college, someone was discipling me and kind of said, hey, I think you should do this for a long time. So that's what God called me to. So we kind of I joined into the Navigators and started in New Mexico, then made my way to at UNM, then made my way to Laramie, Wyoming. And Laramie is where I met my friend Colton, who was asked to come to Austin. And then he said, I'll go if my friend Neil can come with us. So that's kind of what brought us there. And that's what I also met my wife in Laramie. So yeah, there's very jumbled up story of how we got here. But yeah, I've been loving ministry and where God's calling us to right now. And it's been fun.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Tell me a little bit, because I've been in college ministry for a while too. And in that, I'm not really familiar even, and maybe tell our listeners, like, what does college ministry look like for you at all of those other campuses? And then maybe we'll transition and look at, like, what does it look like for you where you're being called to now? But what is Navigator Ministry focused on, or what does that look like practically or programmatically for you at these other campuses?
Yeah. So in general, I'd say if you were to ask most navigators, what do you do? I would say if the majority would say we try to get Christians and grow Christians through maturity, through discipleship, and then kind of help them to think outwardly so that we can keep reaching other people through discipleship and help them in their walk with Jesus. So for me, for example, I joined again whenever I was at Colorado State, and this guy kind of took me under his wing. And then he showed me what it was like to read my Bible and what it looked like to really follow Jesus and how to pray and how do I share my faith. And that's kind of what everybody's hope is. And then after they teach you, they say, hey, you should go teach somebody else this. So I'd say that's kind of our passion. That's like our bread and butter. But what we're currently doing that looks a little different is they said, hey, that's a great model. We've been doing this a long time. It's going really well. However, there's some campuses, there's some places that, people start off and they don't have any Christians to start with. So you got to start with non-Christians, which is great, but it's just going to look different. And then it's not going to be what we normally do. And then they also were realizing there's some not just navigators, but there's just Christian ministries sometimes getting kicked off campuses. So if that's the case, what are you going to do? How are you going to start a ministry if you can't be on campus and you don't have Christians to even start with? What would you do? So they said it'd be probably a good idea to have a model and something different for those who aren't so innovative. What we come up with something that would be helpful for those contexts. So then they asked us to basically move to Austin, Texas and go try out something new, try out a different way of doing ministry on a college campus and what that could look like. So that's why we're here. That's, again, it's going to look different, but that's sort of why we ended up here.
That's awesome. Now, to me, it's generally college ministry in general is like church planning every year. It's like you lose 25% of your congregation and you got to go find a new
Yes.
25%. And so it's this recurring changing door. And what's cool in all that too is you're helping people grow in their faith. But I feel like where y'all are being called to innovate now, it's like you're full-time church planning. There's no base that y'all came into Austin with, because y'all started fresh at a brand new campus with 0 people. And it's like, how do you go from 0 to 1 or 2 or 3? How do you
Yes.
even make those first few connections? And it's easy, I think, to maybe go and find, oh, hey, let's find a few Christians that are already involved. But y'all were really called to do something different and start from reaching the non-Christians first before you even had a student leadership team or anything like that. So tell me about that journey. showing up with
Mm.
zero connections. Like, how do you begin to break in and reach a community where you don't have connections, you don't have existing student leaders? What did that first year of ministry look like for you guys in your context?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It was really hard. Let's just start there. But yeah, I think we started off. We realized what we're getting into is what missionaries do, kind of all the time, especially those who go overseas, because their first thought isn't like I'm going to go to this place and just do what I've always done. It's usually like I got to go to this place, I got to learn the place, I got to learn the people, and then figure out like what is the gospel here? What do these people need, and how could I be a part of what they're doing, and how can I bring Jesus into that? And that's sort of where we started. So we talked to a lot of missionaries who are already doing these things, and some of the biggest things they said is like, oh, like when you pray and fast you'll be blah blah blah, and we're like, we're gonna be fasting. So we like there's just a lot of new things that we weren't always implementing in our lives, and we started to realize like, oh, we need to be like really make sure our whatever we do, our faith, like we are really in line with whatever God has for us. And basically, we're not just going to go in and start something new. We're going to have to unlearn the things that we've always done, and then see what is new. What, like, even if we start different, it could turn out the same. And is that our goal, or is it just I don't know. So we're just trying to figure out like, let's just, whatever we do, let's just be confident God's leading us to that, because maybe he's working in a way that we haven't been able to look at it because we've always done it the same way. So yeah, it started off really hard. We mostly just started off by praying around different campuses. There's one of the reasons why they sent us here. They didn't say like just go to UT, which is obviously everybody knows UT. They said go to a campus and try something new. That was like all they gave us. And they said, and our hands aren't going to be in this. We just want to see what you come up with. And so they asked us, because the campus director, Colton, who I came here with, he's good at he's always trying to come up with new ideas. Like he's ready to go. But for us coming here, we have always had these ideas, but we've always been able to just start something as soon as we talk about it for a while, like, okay, now let's go try it. But we knew like this is just going to take a long time, and we just need to make sure we're patient. And that was really hard because most of the time we'd pray, and then Colton and I would stop our day and be like, well, now what do we do? And that was day one. So then what are we going to do for day two? We're going to do the same thing on a different campus. So there's 19 different campuses here. So that was helpful because we were trying out going to the different ones. But after a while, we said, now this is too many campuses. Now what do we like? We're just trying to get to know the people. Then we said we should also get to know the city. So our schedule started becoming pray on a campus one day, call it a day. Go to something on the city, go get to learn the city of Austin, get to know the people, call it a day, just the different patterns throughout the day, which was kind of helpful. But again, it's when that's your job description, and we weren't like, let's go do this thing and start this ministry or get these people. It was hard. It was hard because we haven't done a lot of that in our lives. Yeah, it was slow, very slow. But it's through that I think we started to really get more in touch with like, oh, we could see God working. But it just took time. And luckily people were patient with us, and people understood, like people on my team, my ministry team, and then also people in the navigators they're telling us to go do something new. They're expecting it to be, this might take a while, just so you know. So for us, it sounded like, this is an awesome idea. Let's go. It started off that way, and then slowly every day it was hard, and a lot of spiritual warfare. Yeah, like my friend was having panic attacks, like just things that we weren't used to having in our lives. It's just yeah, just starting to wrestle with our identity in Christ. Like, who are we when we're not working, or like showing or proving? And
Yeah,
I think God wanted us to rest in that a little bit more. So good things, but very hard things.
for sure. Well, I think like what I hear in that too is just a lot of patience. I feel when you're starting something new, but really y'all were sent out as missionaries within your own country, now I know being originally from Colorado and moving to Texas, it can feel like it's a different country. When some people in
Mm,
Texas I'd even say it's a different country. But in that, the fun thing is you guys came with like a learning heart and like wanting to learn and wanting to grow. And I
Mm,
just think that's awesome. And if you rush that, like you miss so much. And so I don't know. I
mm,
just hear that
yeah.
we're faithful through that time and learning and letting God develop you and grow you and shape
Mm,
what he had envisioned. So now fast forward us a little bit. What has that then turned into as you guys prayed? There was 19 campuses. Are y'all working across all 19? Are y'all focusing on one? What is
mm.
what is the progression of now we feel like God started to lead us in this direction? What has that direction been like for you guys?
Yeah. Yeah, that was as we were kind of getting to pray and going around different campuses, we started to realize there's like four different college campuses that seem to be more integrated with the city. And one, obviously, everybody knows UT. There's another one called St. Edward's, which is like a Catholic school, and again, very well known here in Austin. And another one was Austin Community College, which has 11 different campuses spread throughout Austin. So it's not just one. And then the last one is Houston Tilliston, which is a historically Black college. So we are praying, we decided let's just focus on those four and just pray around each one. We are doing a time, we are spending some time with Jesus one day. And I said, I think we should do it 7 times. It seems biblical. Again, something to do. Some took weren't didn't take quite as long because the school's not as big, but UT would take 45-minute lap every time we walked around it, you know. But yeah, we just were praying around it, and every time we would pray, we were just learning new things about the place, new thing about the people. God would bring new things to mind to pray for, and then we ended up at Austin Community College, so ACC. One of the big reasons is because as we were praying around it, that's whenever we start to experience more spiritual warfare, which seems weird. Why would you want to be there? But it just felt like for some reason we don't feel like we need, like someone doesn't want to see it, you know, like there's an enemy out there. And it feels like that was like one of the first times we were really feeling that. And I wouldn't say we're like super charismatic people. So it felt like, wow, there's something to this. It feels very spiritual. And we realized there wasn't like churches around ACC, and every other place had churches around it.
Mm,
And then we started to realize there also wasn't like any Christian community inside of it. So there was no, in the past, I think they had some, but after 2020, it seemed like most of the Christian community was gone. So it felt a big part of Austin, and it felt a little overlooked. And
mm,
I think that was also for us something that kind of hit home because right before so backing up a little bit, right before we ever even moved to Austin, as we were kind of spending time praying, we're reading through the Gospels and we were looking at how does Jesus start his ministry. And in the navigators, what I've always done, this isn't wrong or anything like that, but what I had always done in the past was I would look for the influencers because they could make the biggest impact. I could reach them and they could reach so many other people. But if you watch how Jesus has started his ministry, you'd be like, that's a weird way to start. Like, why would you start with fishermen, or why would you start with this lady who, you know, doesn't seem, people don't want to be around her? And
yeah.
why would you start with the poor? And just often went to the people who are overlooked. So going to ACC, we started to realize, man, this place feels overlooked. So yeah, I think that became a big part of our hope is how do we, maybe we should focus in mostly here after we prayed around each one. And yeah, kind of started to focus in more on ACC. So
That's awesome. Now, in that, as y'all started to focus in, did y'all start to make some relationships? What is sort of God led y'all into as far as hanging out with people or programmatically? What does college ministry look like for you guys at ACC?
yeah, this is a funny one. So we were realizing if we to be at ACC, there are moments where we would be walking around because there's at ACC there's 11 different campuses. So we were like, well, where do we get involved basically? And we didn't know. So we just started spending more time at each 11 different ones. And we realized pretty quickly that there's a few places where we were some of the only ones walking around who looked out of place. Where like who no one else is just walking around. Everybody's going to class, they have a purpose. We're just moseying. Cops are starting to look at us around the campus police. And we realized to be here, we can't just like be here and do nothing and just start something. Yeah, we have to be a part of it, especially if we need to learn some more. So we decided, let's take a class. Let's be a part of this place. So we took a poetry class, which is not what I wanted to do. That was my friend Colton is pretty good at poetry, and he was pretty excited about the class. And it lined up with a good time. But we took this poetry class, and it ended up being super helpful, and it felt like God was really using that. And still, we talk about it all the time still, because it's just such a fundamental, like a huge place in our life where we thought this is God working. And the reason why is because in the class we had, I'm trying to think, like, I think there's 12 people in the class as a whole, so not huge. We had a good cross section of like what would be in Austin. So we had like transgender students, we had goth students, we had not very many white students, and not very many people. And at the end of the day, we probably end up with like 8 on a good day, So like there wasn't a lot of people, but what was awesome is as we realized this is like a Bible study without the Bible. So people come in with their poetry, basically expressing their desires. And any other Bible study, they would say, we'd just say, oh, it sounds like this really relates to Jesus, or, we could bring out some of those things. But here we just kind of had to be quiet and listen. And we just learned, man, these people were so lonely. And they really wanted Jesus. They wanted church. They had no community. But they didn't know us. They knew that we were Christians, but they weren't asking for our advice. It's not like they're wanting to hang out and talk with us about it, but it helped us to be like, oh, they really need Jesus. They really need church. They just don't. As soon as you label it those things, they will never show up. If we were to show up and say, we're the Navigators, join our Christian ministry, these people in our class that were sharing their thoughts, their hearts, their desires to us, they would never show up. But it's our opportunity to get to know them, ask questions, and then every once in a while kind of share our ideas and thoughts. So I think, we started by being students, and we're still students today. That's the best way to be there. We've taken a lot of classes, and we're on a crazier journey now, but that's how it all started. That's how we got there. And then, anyways, that's kind of where we started. So
That's awesome. So you alluded to something crazy. You said now there's this crazy thing. What's it look like now, or what's shifted or changed?
Well, all right, this is a long story, but basically through this, so we started by, so listening to our class, realizing, they really need friends. This is like pivotal for us. We all know that, like especially this generation after 2020, it's not like this is brand new news, but realizing like there's a girl in our class who showed up and started telling us about this cute boy that we're early in the class, so no one was there. She's telling me and my friend Colton about this really cute boy that she saw, blah, 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 going on and on and on. And after class, I remember talking to Colton and saying, that was crazy. Like, I wonder why she told us all that. And Colton said, I think we might be her only friends. And that was really like a moment where I thought, wow, that's insane. Like, whenever I think of my close friends, I think of people that I can just share my life to. And then I think of there's other people that could be categorized as friends, but I wouldn't just share my heart to. But if I had nobody, who would I share to? And realized the church does a really good job at this. We're good at creating that community and having places for us to be more vulnerable. But the outside world doesn't often have this, especially at a place like a community college. So we thought, man, it'd be so cool if we had a space where we could just have these non-Christians feel welcomed and Christians in the same place. But where do you start with that? And especially at a place that has zero community. There's barely any clubs, there's barely organizations. So is there something we could do to get this going? So we started looking around and realizing, so we're at a cool college, which is funny. It's a community college, but it used to be a mall. And so there's some places that you could be having a class that used to be a Spencer's, or you have some just weird, there's escalators, and it's, it feels very mall-y in some places, which is kind of fun. And then there's this one spot where there's nobody. It's a building, they call it Building 5000, that used to be, I think, a Macy's. We looked it up once, and I'm not positive, but I think it's like a Macy's, so it's giant. But it's vacant. There's nothing in there. So we thought, what if we could bring a gym, or what if we could bring something or a space for these students to be and hang out? So through that, we decided, well, if we were to bring this in, say if we like somehow got investors and made this happen, like we would probably need to make sure people would actually show up to this, or people really do need this. It's not just like from one class in poetry that we're realizing people need friends and we're going to try to make a gym, So we were like, maybe we should do a survey. And this is something we're good at. We do this all the time on college campuses, but usually it's a spiritual survey and get to know students and what is your beliefs and, ask them those questions. But we decided to do the same thing, but for the gym and for a process like this. But we weren't a student organization, so we didn't know how this was going to fly. So we asked some people. They said, go for it. Figured out later they shouldn't have said that because there's some controversy, but they let us do it. So as we were doing these surveys, we met student government, which is one of the only clubs at the time on campus. The student government came to us and said, what are you doing? You're doing our job. And we said, well, we're just like trying to figure out, we want to make a gym. Like we're passionate about this. And they said, this is awesome. You should talk to the chancellor. So we said, okay, apparently the chancellor's new to the school. He wants to talk to students. Learned later on he's about love. Like there's just so many cool things happening. So we're like, this kind of aligns. It feels like God's wanting us to move in this direction. Right before we talk to the chancellor, we also somehow keep getting into different conversations with people who are like businessy people who are saying, oh, you need to like pitch this as like you are going to invest in this. This is your thing. You haven't you just need to sell them this. And I am not in that world. So I was like, okay, this does feel like God's thing because this is way outside of my comfort zone, outside of Colton's comfort zone. And we showed up with our laptop. We had a presentation. We went through the whole thing, showed the chancellor, and he said, I love your idea. We're gonna make this happen, basically. He said, however, not with your investors, but we'll pay for it. And I was already like, okay, because we weren't gonna be able to do this. So the chancellor, with all that, was like, we're gonna make this happen. We said, cool. Is there anything we do in the meantime then to like help you, help this get moving or like, how can we help your school? We want to be here to serve. This is what we're about. We told them we're Christians. We told them we work for the Navigators and we're kind of secret students. That's what we told them. We're just here because we want to help the student population. And he loved it. And he said, and in the meantime, he's like, I don't know. I've never been asked that first off. So he's like, usually people work for me. And he's like, but I think if you guys could maybe start your own student organization, give yourself a little more, that way people aren't frustrated about you doing surveys, but like this is important. And then just continue to figure out or continue to get data and then send it to me so we could talk to the board. He's like, cause I'm in on this, but I need the board behind me too. So we're like, great. So we started our student organization. And this is where, like I told you, it's a long story. So this is where it gets crazy because this is where it's actually been the most fun. And we were kind of expecting this is kind of plan B, but this has become more plan A, which is like maybe what God had all along. But we thought, okay, so maybe we can't have a space yet. We don't have a gym. But what if we start helping create some sort of community so that if this basically creating a problem, like, okay, here is community, but now people don't have a place to really hang out. So now we really need a space. That was sort of I think a little bit of our thinking behind it, but also we genuinely, we want to help create community. It wasn't just for that motive. That seems like a bad motive, but we really care about these students. We want to help create community. So we said, what if we start a student organization that is basically the club of clubs? So it's like we're a club that helps you start clubs. Because at ACC, there's a lot of red tape. There's to start a club, you need 3 other officers. But a lot of times, again, people don't have friends. So it's like you show up, you're like, I really like chess. I know nobody else that likes chess. How do I start a club if I don't even know where to start? So as a club, we now have the resources and ability to give people like a table. We're going to set up a table for you. And now we're going to say interested in chess. And now people can show up. And through that, you can start your own club if you want to. Or you guys just do your thing and play some chess with the people that you want. We're just trying to help create community. Kind of like student life in a way. So sort of like where we saw a little loophole in the student life system, which didn't seem to be thriving. So we thought maybe we could just get it moving. So that's where we started, really so that we could do surveys, and then did some more surveys, sent to the chancellor, they're going to go forward with this somehow. So this is like moving forward, basically. But the chancellor, they almost went forward and then it got put on pause. So right now it's on pause for the space. But in the meantime, yeah, we're helping create these communities, and we have a lot of different things happening right now. It's fun. We have like a Dungeons and Dragons group that people wanted to start. We had like a Minecraft group that some people wanted to start. A different video game group that people want to start. There was a fitness group for a while. There's this like music group. There's all these things. And then there's also like a Bible study that popped out from that. And this is all because students came to us and said, can you help me start this? Can you help me start this? Can you help me start this? So that's what we're doing. And then we have even more if you want me to keep going.
So I had no clue that we would start off with, we're walking around 19 campuses just praying and then heading home for the day, to now we're talking to chancellors and getting plans drawn for a gymnasium, to now we are starting the student organization web mastermind to help create communities. I mean, I didn't know there would be that much. So if you have more, keep the story going.
Dude, it just keeps going. That's what I'm saying. Like, it just feels like, and all the way through, it feels like God just is opening these doors. Like, it's been nothing outside of like what we feel like he's just like leading us to this thing. And then all this other thing kind of opens up. So this semester has been the most fun semester. So all of the stuff so far that I've told you about seems still pretty exciting, but day in and day out has been like, I'm taking at one point I was taking a class in watercolors and I was not enjoying my life. It's like me and 60-year-old women basically. And it was really tough because I was like, this does not feel like ministry or like the ministry I'm used to at all. But lately we're moving in this direction that just feels like where people are getting to know us at the school, where they're like, the staff love us. And often we've been in conversations with the staff who will say, what do you like? Why are you doing this? And then we get to kind of share our passion behind ministry and what God's doing and why we decided to do this. And it actually has been cool because it's fun to see how they have to wrestle with. I thought in my mind, a Christian just goes and you're just like, we've actually had people say this, like usually they try to go in and almost manipulate a situation so that they can end up getting people into their Bible study or into their group, like, hey, we'll help with this thing, but it's really just to get more people into their group. But they're like, but what you guys are doing is like, you're just going to serve. And then someone said, that doesn't seem religious in nature, is it? And then we'd say, I think it is. So then we started to like, it's just cool because people are starting to wrestle with like, oh, what you're doing, I like, and I don't know what to do with that, which is kind of fun. So that's one part of it. That's kind of cool. But recently, so now to really get into it, it's been, we decided this semester, let's do like, let's make this thing called a conversation cafe is what we called it. And we're going to get coffee and we're going to be in this space. Actually, I'm going to back up a little bit before I get there. So you can edit that if you do. But I was going to say what we started was it's office hours. So we don't have our office, and we decided it'd be really cool to have our own space again. So that'd be really fun. But let's start with an office hours, and we'll just claim a spot. They call it the social staircase because it's everybody's going up and down, and you can like kind of sit on the sides, So it's a perfect spot for the most traffic, basically. And we said, we'll say this is our office. We'll always have a table we do it Tuesday and Thursday. So every single Tuesday, Thursday, we set up a table. And that way people can come. If they want to start a ministry, start a club, we can help them with that. Or if they're like in what it's called connection point again. So if they're in our group connection point, we can help them in whatever they're doing. But we just have a space where people just constantly show up to. And then on Tuesday afternoons, we started in that same space, we started another event called Conversation Cafe. And Conversation Cafe is basically when students come together, we have coffee, and we're just trying to get students to have deeper conversations. Basically a place where we have one question every day. Usually it's like last Thursday or this Thursday. No, Tuesday. What day is it? So on Tuesday we had, the question was, if you could, what was it? Blanking. It doesn't really matter. Oh, if you had to do a TED talk, like what would you speak on? So it's basically a question that's like not super service level, or it's just like you don't get to know the person, but like also not bearing your soul. So it's like pretty welcoming, inviting. People sometimes get their coffee run out, so it's just a place for people to get to know, to be there and get to know each other. And we've been doing it the whole semester, and we're starting to see a similar faces, similar group of people. It's so exciting. There's either like, you never know what you're going to get. You're like, you could be in a conversation with somebody that's like, this is just silly, this makes no sense. Or you could be like, this is really deep, and like, I don't even know what to do with this information. It's pretty heavy. And a lot of spiritual conversation in between a lot of times. So just really cool spot. Then on Thursdays, we have same spot. We're just always at the social staircase. This is our place. And we do, we call it Exploring Jesus Together. So it's a Bible study that's just in front of anybody, and it's for anybody to show up at any point in time, whether you're a Christian, not a Christian. It's just very entry level Bible study, just for a place to, I want to know more about Jesus. Mm-hmm. And so people know us as Connection Point, but they also know us as like these Christians that are starting this thing. The people in Conversation Cafe also know we're doing this Jesus thing. So sometimes the circles overlap, mostly not so far, but it's funny, you'll see like the people from Conversation Cafe will hang out with us. And then as soon as we open our Bibles, some of them leave, but as soon as we shut them, they come back. So it's like they're wrestling. They're like, it's like they like us, but they don't know what to do with this part of us. And it's cool though. It's like, it's just opened up so many conversations. The idea is it's very inviting. And the hope is, if we get some more, again, so going back to like what the navigators do is like, we hope to make disciples, some people who are like, I want to follow Jesus. We could help them in their faith, and then help them to see what we're doing and say, what do you like to do? Like, go join that club. This is part of what we're doing, or be a part of these conversation cafes, or we want people to know Jesus. This is our hope, and this is a good way to do it. So long story, but that's what we're doing. So it's been really fun.
That's awesome. No, I think one of the cool things is a lot of our listeners are probably more in I'd say just church ministry life. Maybe not a ton of college pastors listening today. And as I was hearing your story, I just kept being reminded of like, man, you really are like a missionary sent to go reach the lost here in America, and in a different way than maybe some churches are. And I think some churches might even be wrestling with, how do we reach more people in our community that aren't just showing up whenever Zack helps us set up Facebook ads and they don't want to come to our church, or we're running these Google ads, or we have a website. Like, why aren't people coming in our doors? And I think one of the big things you said was, we just felt really called just to go serve, and like how shocking that was to some people.
Yeah.
I loved one of the pastors I worked with at one point that was sort of my boss. He said, like, if this church disappears tomorrow, if the community is like, no, we didn't notice, like, did we really do what we were called to do? Like, and he was like, no, like, I think our church, if it were to disappear tomorrow, the community would be like, oh my goodness, like, they're gone. Like, they were doing so much. They were helping so much. They were serving. Like, and I just think like that is just such a high calling for us as the church body to figure out, how do we serve our neighbors? How do we care for our neighbors? And I think what you're experiencing in your story that you've shared with us today, it's like, it's making an impact. It's making a difference. People that wouldn't reach or respond yes to a Facebook ad, they might respond yes to playing chess for a few weeks in a row. And then those conversations might lead to spiritual conversation. But man, I'm just encouraged on how you guys really have positioned yourselves in a place of, hey, we just want to be here to serve you as the campus. And I think God's just continued to open doors, and it's just been cool. But in that, like, what advice you share with a church or with a pastor who's listening to this now, and they know like, man, yes, I have a heart to reach the lost in my city. Like, what would you encourage them to do as far as like some next steps in thinking like a missionary within their own city?
Yeah. I think that's a lot of people's hope, you know? So I think it's a hard thing to wrestle through is like, what do we do? Because it feels like, this is how we felt in Laramie, and we moved here. So in Laramie, Wyoming, we had an amazing group of students who were just on fire for Jesus. But like, and they were also like trying to reach their friends, but it felt like we actually had one student tell us this amazing story of like, oh man, I've been hanging out with my friends who are non-Christians, and this guy became a Christian and is like, all in for Jesus. And we're like, that's so cool. And like, this is the dream. This is what we're hoping for. Now you're discipling this guy. And, like, this is what we're hoping for. And we asked him like, so like, what did you do? Like, what was it that like helped in the semester that you switched? He's like, I stopped going to nav events. And we were like, ooh, we failed, because what we were trying to do is like, we realized I think we're trying to bring people into our thing all the time, and they didn't have enough time to go do their thing and to like be actually out with their friends, their other friends. And so I think that was one of the things we were wrestling through even before coming here, is like in Laramie, it was always this, again, still going really well in Laramie. So I'm not saying anything against that. I'm just saying it was a challenge for us to be like, okay, these students are on fire, but it seems like it's mostly Christians and we're just trying to help them and reaching their friends. Like, how do we help them and not just keep bringing them into our thing? And it just feels like a constant clash. And so I think for us coming here, we decided, instead of just starting with the loss, or instead of starting with Christians, we started with a space. Let's create a space where anybody can come in and just feel welcome and invited, in a piece of that, without feeling over Christiany or like for Christians being like, oh, I don't want to be a part of this, like almost too much on the other side. Is like, how do we find a space for just people to feel safe and can just genuinely make friends? And that's why it took so long, is like, I don't know how to start something like that. How do you create that? We read an article that I think is a good explanation of this, and I'm going to probably butcher it, but Timothy Keller wrote something, this article about how Christians need to create the front porch or something like that. Or yeah, I think that's what he called it. Basically, instead of just saying, come all the way into my church, where now it's going to be a full-on culture that you're not used to, and it's like a maybe culture shock that you're not used to. Come to my thing. It's like, how do we create a space where you're like, you see it, you're maybe out on the porch, you can see the people come in and out, but maybe you're not all the way invested inside. So yeah, I think so we were deciding maybe we could do that. That's why we're on the social staircase. Heavily trafficked. We open our Bibles. Anybody can show up at any time. They can leave at any time. It's always getting interrupted. I always tell people that as soon as we start, I say, just so you know, this is going to get interrupted if you've never been here before. It's not like we have a lot of people, so most people are used to it at this point. I was like, but that is the purpose of this, is like, we want it to be interruptible. And I think that's the way kind of Jesus lived his life a little bit. He lived his life in a place where he's pretty interruptible, which is hard to do, because if you're always thinking about the sermon, or always thinking about, you're like, how do we create this thing for our people and pastor them, and then also reach people, it becomes a lot of things. And so it started to become, for us, it was a kind of a shift in mindset of like, maybe it's creating a space where it's inviting but not overly like scary to join, or and people can just see what you're doing right in front of them. So
Awesome.
yeah, that's kind of my thought behind it.
I think that's a huge just encouragement or piece of advice for ministry leaders. I'm thinking of youth ministry, college ministry, adult ministry, whatever it is. How do you create those front porch spaces that people can experience by just walking by, but also feel safe enough to come up on the porch and say hello,
Yeah.
and not be fully like, I'm too scared to come all the way inside the church type thing. And so I
Yeah.
think that's a great nugget of advice and wisdom for people to be thinking about that. And I know just in working in college ministry, like the biggest thing was loneliness, loneliness, loneliness. And I think
Mhm.
you can, like, that's where you and I have spent a lot of ministry time, is college ministry. I think it extends even beyond that. Like, I look at young
Mm,
adults who move away from college and are newlyweds and
mm.
move to this new town for this new job, and they don't know anybody, and there's loneliness there. I think one of the greatest things we can do in those spaces as leaders in ministry is create those front sports spaces where people can congregate and hang out. and connect with other people. And I just think y'all have done a great job of that. And it's been fun to follow from the outside and peek in and see what
Yeah.
God's been calling y'all to. But I'm also like, I'm so glad we got to have this conversation today, because it's like, man,
Yeah.
how can we help other people do these front porch things,
Yeah.
conversation cafes? And it might look different for everyone, but I just think if we can create more of those spaces, it's going to just open the door for ministry in all of our communities even greater. So,
Yeah, and there's one more thought to that too. Is I think in the past too, we in ministry, and even in the NAB ministry, like this happens a lot. It feels, I don't know if siloed is quite the right word, because it's like you're doing it together, but then you kind of go out like, hey, you kind of take care of this side of the ministry, you kind of take care, so you kind of end up in different places. But we realize, like, man, if people want to see the body of Christ in the middle, like, in it all, I think it'd be important for us to just start doing more things together in the places where you would have like the front porches, like, where's your front porch, and can we bring the body of Christ around so that they don't just say, oh, wow, Neil is so cool and he's so, like, whatever it is, but like, could we just be that space? And they say, oh, like, it's in all of you and you're all Christians, and now I have to, it's just like, just the hope is that they'd see more of Jesus.
yeah, well, that's awesome. Well, Neil, I just want to say thanks so much for joining us on the podcast today. I know I learned a lot today and am challenged some, and I know all of our listeners will be challenged and encouraged as well. I just want to say thanks again for hanging out with us today.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for having me, man. It's so fun to see you and be on this podcast. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, everyone, thanks for tuning in to the podcast today. If you have any questions for Neil, we'll get his contact information for you. You can reach out to us in the comments below. I know he'd love to help you think through how you could be a missionary in your community, how you could really galvanize and encourage and strengthen your church body to go out and do the same thing, create these front porch spaces so that you guys can reach more people. So in the meantime, we'll catch you soon. Later.
Yeah.